Imhotep, the commoner who became a god. In a land ruled by gods and kings, how did a commoner rise so high that he was worshipped as a deity for centuries? Imhotep's story is unlike any other in the history of Egypt. He was not born into royalty. He was not born a warrior or a noble, yet through his intelligence, innovation, and spiritual insight, he earned a place among the immortals. Long before the name Imhotep became a legend, he was just a man with extraordinary vision in a world shaped by rigid hierarchy and tradition. Born around 2700 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, Imhotep likely came from humble origins, but his abilities quickly set him apart. Egypt at the time was undergoing major changes, politically, culturally, and spiritually, and Imhotep would be at the heart of it all. He wasn't just a thinker, he was a doer, someone who didn't just dream of new possibilities but brought them to life. His first and most famous achievement was as the architect of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the very first pyramid ever built. This was not only a revolution in design, but a spiritual and cultural leap for all of Egypt. It marked the beginning of Egypt's golden age of pyramid building, which would reach its peak with the Great Pyramid of Giza centuries later. But Imhotep was much more than an architect. He was also a physician, and possibly the author of one of the earliest known medical texts. He treated patients with care and understanding rare for his time. His name became associated with healing, and centuries later, people would visit temples built in his honor to pray for health and recovery. The Greeks even identified him with their healing god Asclepius, and kept his legend alive in their own traditions. He was also a high priest of the sun god Ra, and a leading advisor to Pharaoh Djoser, making decisions that affected the future of the entire kingdom. His understanding of astronomy helped align sacred buildings with the stars. His wisdom guided court policy. His innovations influenced not just architecture, but the way people thought about power, divinity, and the afterlife. After his death, Imhotep's legend grew. Unlike other officials whose names faded into obscurity, Imhotep's fame only increased. He was deified, something that was almost unheard of for someone not born into royalty. Temples were dedicated to him, prayers were offered in his name, and people believed his spirit continued to heal and guide them. Imhotep's transformation from man to God wasn't just about his accomplishments, it was about how he embodied the very best of what humanity could achieve. He used his mind to build, to heal, to guide, and to inspire. He didn't seek power, but he earned it. He didn't demand worship, but he was worshipped. In many ways, Imhotep was a man far ahead of his time. He set the foundation, both literally and figuratively, for much of what Egyptian civilization would become. He proved that brilliance could rise from anywhere, that one person, regardless of birth, could change the course of history, and in doing so, he became not just a part of Egypt's story, but a legend written in stone and memory, the commoner who became a god. Before the world stood in awe of the Great Pyramid of Giza, before the names of pharaohs like Khufu and Ramses echoed through the halls of history, there was Imhotep. Centuries before Egypt's skyline was dominated by smooth-sided pyramids, one man sparked the architectural revolution that would define an entire civilization. That man was Imhotep, and without him, the idea of a pyramid may never have been born. The Great Pyramids may get the glory today, but Imhotep laid the first stone, both literally and metaphorically. He designed and built the Step Pyramid of Djoser, the first large-scale stone structure in human history. It was not only taller and more complex than anything that came before it, it was the beginning of the pyramid tradition itself. The Step Pyramid was revolutionary. At the time, royal tombs were simple flat structures called mastabas. Imhotep changed all that. His idea to stack multiple mastabas one on top of the other created a structure that reached toward the heavens, reflecting the spiritual ambitions of the pharaoh and the people. It was the first time architecture and religion came together in such a monumental way. The pyramid was just the centerpiece of a much larger complex. Imhotep designed an entire ceremonial landscape around it, including temples, courtyards, and underground chambers. Everything was precisely aligned with religious and cosmic principles. It wasn't just a tomb, it was a symbol of divine power, rebirth, and eternity. What makes Imhotep's achievement even more remarkable is the context. He did this at a time when tools were primitive, when mathematics was basic, and when no one had ever attempted such a massive project. He introduced the use of cut stone blocks, an innovation that required incredible engineering, organization, and planning. It was the first time stone had been used on such a massive scale, and it worked. This wasn't just an architectural feat, it was a statement. Egypt had entered a new era. The gods favored the land. The pharaoh was more than just a king, he was a bridge to the divine, and the man who helped build that bridge was Imhotep. His influence didn't end there. His ideas shaped future generations of architects, engineers, and religious leaders. Every pyramid that came after, from Sneferu's bent pyramid to Khufu's Great Pyramid, was built on the foundation Imhotep laid. Even though his name is often overshadowed by the more famous pyramids, historians and archaeologists know the truth. Without Imhotep, there would be no Pyramid Age. His vision launched one of the greatest building booms in human history, and all of it began with a man who saw beyond the limits of his time and dared to think higher. Today, tourists travel the world to see Egypt's iconic pyramids, but long before these grand monuments existed, there was one structure that started it all, and one mind behind it: Imhotep. Before the pyramids were famous, there was him, the brain behind the world's first megastructure. He didn't just build the first pyramid, he built a whole new way of thinking. Before the Great Pyramid of Giza, before colossal temples rose from the desert floor, there stood one revolutionary monument, the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, towering over the sands. It was the first of its kind, the world's earliest megastructure built entirely of stone. But behind this marvel wasn't a pharaoh. It was a man, a thinker. His name was Imhotep. What made Imhotep so extraordinary wasn't just that he built something big, it's that he built something impossible. At a time when humans had never worked with cut stone on such a scale, when most structures were made of mud brick, this man looked at the materials of the earth and imagined permanence. He didn't just build a tomb for a king, he laid the foundation for all monumental architecture that followed. Let's go back to 2700 BCE. Pharaoh Djoser ruled Egypt, and until then, kings were buried in mastabas, low, flat tombs, functional but forgettable. Imhotep took that basic shape and imagined stacking it, layer by layer, until it became a towering symbol of divine ascension. He took a horizontal concept and turned it vertical. This was more than engineering, it was philosophy in stone. The Step Pyramid wasn't just 6 levels of limestone, it was a message. Each step symbolized a stage in the king's journey to the heavens. For a culture obsessed with the afterlife, this was groundbreaking. Imhotep gave death a direction, upward, and then there was the scale. Over 200 feet tall, it dwarfed everything that came before it. The entire complex around it, temples, courtyards, ceremonial halls, formed a spiritual machine. Every shadow, every alignment, every entrance had a purpose. Imhotep didn't just build a monument, he designed a living, breathing, sacred space. But the question remains, how did he do it? Imhotep had to solve problems no one had ever faced. How do you cut, transport, and stack massive stones with no cranes, no pulleys, no steel tools? He engineered new systems of labor and construction, organized thousands of workers, and mapped out a plan that was as complex as any modern project. Some even believe he invented the idea of architectural blueprints, sketches and models to visualize before building. What's more impressive is that he was self-taught. There's no record of a mentor, no school, no earlier project to model after. He built this megastructure from vision, intellect, and will. Imhotep also understood something few others did. Structures were not just physical, they were psychological. The sight of the Step Pyramid would strike awe into anyone who saw it. No wonder later pharaohs copied him. The pyramid inspired centuries of building. Giza, Luxor, Karnak, all were made possible because one man proved it could be done. He didn't just build a structure, he started a tradition, a culture, a civilization of scale. He made Egypt think big, but even more powerful than the stone was the mind behind it. Imhotep's thinking was systems level. He didn't see architecture as separate from astronomy, from religion, from society. To him, it was all one language, different ways of saying the same truth. Harmony, order, eternity. In a world ruled by gods and myths, Imhotep introduced logic, not to destroy mystery, but to honor it. He showed that human reason could serve divine purpose, that measuring a wall was no less sacred than chanting a prayer, that math and magic could work together. And maybe that's why his structure still stands, not just because of good materials, but because it was designed with truth. The kind of truth that doesn't erode, a truth written not in ink, but in geometry and light. Today, we look at the skyscrapers of our time with wonder, but none of them would exist without the first one, the original high-rise of human ambition. And behind that great monument, like the beating heart of a colossus, was one brilliant brain. Imhotep didn't just change architecture, he changed thought itself. Secrets buried in stone, what Imhotep left behind. His structures have survived for 4,700 years, but their meaning is only beginning to be understood. Imhotep didn't leave behind scrolls of instruction. He didn't write an autobiography or carve his name into every wall. What he left was far more cryptic and far more powerful. He left secrets, hidden not in words but in stone. To walk through the Step Pyramid complex at Saqqara is to enter a riddle in limestone. At first glance, it seems like a grand royal tomb. But look deeper and you see clues, alignments, chambers, patterns that suggest something more. This wasn't just a burial site. It was a coded message to the future. The entrance passage doesn't point randomly. It aligns with the stars of the northern sky, the imperishable stars, believed to guide the soul of the king to eternity. Columns and corridors echo sacred geometry. The number of rooms, the repetition of motifs, the angles, all seem to reflect celestial cycles, symbolic numbers, and religious myths. Imhotep encoded the Egyptian worldview into his architecture. The pyramid itself, layered in 6 steps, is more than design. 6 was the number of cosmic creation. In their myth, the world was formed in 6 parts before the 7th brought rest and harmony. He turned mythology into mathematics. And then there's the underground maze. Beneath the pyramid lies a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, over 3 miles in total. Some were burial vaults. Others appear to serve ritual or symbolic purposes. One chamber contains blue glazed tiles, possibly referencing the night sky, making it a kind of celestial womb from which the king would be reborn. Why build so much underground? Why hide so much beneath what is already magnificent? Because the Egyptians believed in layers, layers of reality, layers of meaning. Imhotep understood that to protect sacred knowledge, you had to hide it in plain sight. The pyramid was a puzzle. He also left behind more subtle messages. His building techniques themselves tell a story. The way he layered limestone blocks in interlocking patterns reveals a deep understanding of stress and weight. He wasn't just guessing, he was calculating, yet he never claimed credit. While later pharaohs carved their names on everything, Imhotep was humble. In many places, his name appears quietly, respectfully, often only discovered much later. That humility was strategic. Power for Imhotep didn't come from ego, it came from wisdom. He wasn't building for fame, he was building for truth. Some researchers believe Imhotep even embedded numerical codes into his architecture. Measurements based on sacred ratios, the golden ratio, the sacred cubit, the geometry of the cosmos. Whether he knew the math consciously or intuitively, his buildings reflect a harmony that goes beyond function. They resonate. You don't just see them, you feel them. Even now, scientists and historians continue to uncover mysteries from his work. Advanced scanning techniques have revealed hidden chambers beneath the pyramid, still sealed after thousands of years. What's inside? No one fully knows, but what's clear is that Imhotep's work wasn't finished at the surface. He buried knowledge deep, perhaps for us to find when we're ready. Some even speculate that parts of the Step Pyramid complex served as an initiation site, a spiritual test for priests or royalty. Moving through narrow, dark tunnels, entering chambers of symbolic death and rebirth, like a real-life myth enacted in stone. Imhotep didn't just build a monument. He left a manual, written in silence and shape, a whisper from the past that says, look deeper, think broader, feel the structure. He knew that one day we'd come back, we'd ask what he meant, and slowly, layer by layer, his secrets are answering. How one man rewrote the rules of civilization. He didn't just change Egypt, he changed what it means to be human. There are people in history who build within the rules, and then there are people who throw the rules away and create something entirely new. Imhotep was the latter. He didn't just add to his civilization, he redefined it. Before him, architecture was temporary, medicine was superstition, knowledge was tribal. After him, civilization began to take shape, not as a set of customs, but as a system of mastery over nature, death, and time. Imhotep lived at a turning point. Egypt was emerging from prehistory, still learning how to govern, how to worship, how to build. There was no guidebook, no established method. He wrote the first chapter of civilization with his own hands. By designing the Step Pyramid, he showed that permanence was possible, that humans could defy decay, that a structure could last forever, and with it, an idea. He taught the world that legacy could be designed. In medicine, he introduced a new kind of thinking, observation, record-keeping, diagnosis. He didn't blame spirits or demons. He studied symptoms. He created lists, instructions. In short, he created science. Modern historians now believe he was the author of portions of the Edwin Smith Papyrus, a medical text centuries ahead of its time. In social terms, he proved that birth didn't limit destiny. He wasn't born into royalty or priesthood. He rose through merit, intelligence, insight. In doing so, he created a new kind of hero, not a warrior or king, but a thinker. He also introduced the idea of interdisciplinary genius. Today we separate disciplines, science, art, religion. Imhotep combined them. He showed that to be whole, a civilization must blend its parts. He was the prototype for the Renaissance man, thousands of years before the Renaissance. Even his elevation to godhood was revolutionary. Pharaohs were expected to become divine. Imhotep wasn't, yet his wisdom was so profound, his influence so lasting, that the people couldn't forget him. They needed him to be more than a man, and so they made him a god, not because he demanded it, but because he deserved it. He didn't conquer lands, he conquered time. And maybe that's the final lesson. Imhotep wasn't chasing power, he was chasing understanding, and in that pursuit, he became immortal. In every culture, there comes a figure who changes everything, who takes a world asleep and wakes it up. For Egypt, for human civilization itself, that figure was Imhotep. One man, 1,000 roles, a legacy carved in stone and in spirit. From human to legend, Imhotep's unbelievable journey. He wasn't born a god, but time refused to let him remain a man. Imhotep's story is one of the most astonishing transformations in history. From a humble mortal in ancient Egypt to a figure worshipped as a deity by multiple civilizations, his journey defies belief. He lived, he served, he built, but what he became was something eternal. A name whispered through temples, etched into stone, and kept alive in both legend and memory. To understand how a man became a legend, we have to return to the third dynasty of Egypt, around 2700 BCE. Imhotep was born a commoner, not a pharaoh, not a prince, not even a noble, but what he had was a mind like no other. He rose through the ranks to become the chief advisor to Pharaoh Djoser, holding titles that crossed boundaries: vizier, high priest, architect, healer, astronomer, and philosopher. It was Imhotep who conceived and constructed the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the first pyramid ever built. This was no simple tomb. It was an architectural revolution. Before it, Egyptian tombs were flat-roofed structures called mastabas. Imhotep envisioned something far grander, a structure that reached toward the heavens, layer by layer, step by step, a physical staircase for the soul. This act alone would have secured his place in history, but it was only the beginning. Imhotep's genius wasn't limited to stone. He wrote, theorized, and practiced medicine. At a time when most of the world still explained illness with demons, he approached the body as a system. He understood that knowledge wasn't a threat to the gods, but a gift from them. Centuries passed, but the memory of Imhotep didn't fade. It grew. Egyptians began to honor him as a sage, then as a healer, then as a divine figure. His tomb became a pilgrimage site. People left offerings, carved prayers, and sought cures from the air around his resting place. And then something rare happened, something that sealed his place as more than a mortal. The Greeks, renowned for their own gods and philosophers, looked back through time and adopted him into their pantheon. They equated him with Asclepios, god of medicine and healing. In this cultural fusion, Imhotep became immortal in two worlds. It's easy to call someone a genius in hindsight, but Imhotep's genius was recognized by his own people and by future civilizations. He didn't conquer lands, he conquered ignorance. He didn't build empires, he built ideas. That's a legacy far harder to erase. Even in modern times, Imhotep appears in films, novels, and pop culture, though often distorted into something monstrous. But the real Imhotep was a man of light, a symbol of intellect, humility, and sacred service. A man who looked at the impossible and simply said, "I can." We speak of legends as if they are stories, detached from truth. But Imhotep reminds us that some legends begin with real people, extraordinary, not because they were born into power, but because they shaped the world with vision, wisdom, and silent devotion.